How's everyone doing this morning? So good to see you and hear you. If we haven't had a chance to meet yet, my name's Garry. I'm one of the pastors here. Really glad that you have decided to spend some of your time with us today, whether that's right here in Theater 6 and Theater 2 across the hall, or, of course, online from the comfort of your own home. As Russ mentioned, we're kicking off a brand new series today called No Offence, because doesn't it seem that everyone is mad about something these days? They're just ticked off. It seems there's a new outrage every day. You just turn on your news feed and everybody's mad about something. And it's every day, quite literally. I don't know if you've ever heard of Slate magazine. It's an online magazine. They put out a year of outrage calendar. Yeah, where you could click on any day of the year and find out what people were outraged about on that particular day. It was rather eye-opening. Get this, people were mad at politicians, which is understandable, sports figures, memes, movies, books, clowns, totally get that one, commercials, toys, games. They were mad at humanity, they were mad at each other, they were mad at me, and they were mad at you. Get this, the Year of Outrage calendar didn't come out in the latest Year of Outrage, 2021. It wasn't even 2020. It was 2014. I think it's safe to say that not much has changed over the years, except that maybe people today are more easily angered, more easily offended than they were back then. But it's hard to avoid, isn't it? Anger's everywhere. It's anger at everyone else. You know, the idiots on social media that think they know everything. It's anger at the morons who blindly lined up to get the jab. It's anger at the wingnuts who refuse to get the jab. It's anger at the sheep who just blindly wear masks. It's anger at the boneheads who won't or don't wear the mask. It's anger at those who kneel or don't kneel during the national anthem. It's anger about the rightness of your perspective, whatever your perspective and issue is, because we all have an issue that we want people to agree with us on. And when they don't agree with us, what happens? We get angry at them for not being angry about the thing we're angry about. Like the band saying, it's a mad world in every sense of the word. It's mad how people are reacting, and it's mad because we're just mad. And you know what? I wish I could stand here and say I was immune to all this. I've got a secret pill I take, and I'd be all good. But, man, I find myself easily offended and upset these days. I mean, just the other day, my wife and I were sitting in our living room, and I said, I hate Facebook. I said, I can't believe how mad people are at each other and how angry and mean they are. It's like everyone's offended. And you know what she said to me? Get this. She says, well, I know, dear, you tell me that every time you go on Facebook. You know what? It's probably never going to change, so you have a choice. Either get off Facebook or learn to accept it, which I found offensive. But here's the thing. She's right, isn't she? You know, a few years ago, a guy named Brant Hansen released a book called Unoffendable. His book starts with these words. Listen to this. He says, this may sound like the dumbest thing you've ever heard, but here goes. You can choose to be unoffendable. I actually heard a guy say this at a business meeting. It's a choice we can make, to choose not to be offended. And then he says this, sure, right, yeah. You know, just choose, as if it's really up to us. I found this offensive. Man, from the latest headline to the comments on your social media feed, to the person who just cut you off in traffic, stole your parking space, cut in line, incessantly spoke during the opening of, Spider-Man Far From Home, there are plenty of opportunities to be offended each day. And you know what the easy thing to do is to respond in kind, to dish it back out, to make your feelings and your opinions known, which we all know only does one thing, and that's it perpetuates the whole thing. I won an argument on Facebook, said no one ever, right? Yet we continue to engage in them. And what's the result? We end up offending someone who offended us, and so they let us know that how we offended them, which offends us, and so we tell them, and then they're offended. And on it goes. And the sad thing about that whole thing is it happens on a platform with the biggest part of communication missing. Facial expression, tone of voice, body language. Anyone here ever receive an email and you read it and you're going, and you conjure up all these stories in your head about how that person is feeling, and then you talk to them, it's like, I never meant that at all. Our vision here at the Meeting Place is to be a church that is known for unleashing God's extravagant love in this city and around the world. And that vision is rooted in some foundational words that Jesus spoke to a crowd of people who had decided to follow him. And he challenged them to live differently, to expect that as a result of living God's way, they would naturally stand out in such a way as to influence and brighten the world in a positive, uplifting way. Why? So that those around them would be drawn and open to hear more about God. And so Jesus said, you are the salt of the earth. You're to be here to be salt seasoning that brings out the God flavors of this earth. So in other words, just like salt flavors and preserves the things it comes into contact with, Jesus said we will naturally be like that when we learn to trust and follow and obey what he tells us and teaches us to do. Because at the end of the day, we all influence the world around us with whatever it is we believe the most. Jesus also said you are to be light, bringing out the God colors in the world, but not in an obnoxious way. Not like turning on a flashlight in the middle of the night and shining it in somebody's eyes, but rather to be more like the light of a lamp or a candle, a light that invites people to come closer. And Jesus followers, those who truly surrender and are learning to live by following the nudges that we feel, to receive Jesus' care, much like Sylvia talked about last week. If you missed that message, our kids' place director, Sylvia, shared her story. What a beautiful story, and I encourage you to go back and listen to it. But when we do that, when we follow Jesus and kind of respond to the nudges that he gives us, we'll naturally be salt and light. It's not about us being and doing those things. That's religion. And religion just makes us more angry because we get offended at the people that don't follow the rules. And I know that because I've tried it. So when Jesus says that his followers are to be salt and to be light, and that it's a natural result of hanging out with him and spending time with him, it kind of reveals how difficult that might be for us to show up differently in culture. When we read a post and it offends us, when it strikes to a value that we hold on to, it can be so difficult not to share our thoughts and our ideas in the comments section. No? It's hard not to share our thoughts and make our opinions, our beliefs, our ideas known during a conversation, whether that be at work, in the hallway at school, on the bus, or around the dinner table. I would suggest that as a follower of Jesus, the question we would do well to ask ourselves is this: when we're offended, am I trying to make a point, or am I wanting to make a difference? When I'm offended, am I trying to make a point, or am I wanting to make a difference? I think most people want to make a point. I know that rings true for me. I want my point to be heard. Okay? But here's the thing. If we want to be part of God's mission, to make a difference, to stand out, to be salt and light, I'm going to submit to you that it requires a different heart attitude, a different way of thinking, a different philosophy when dealing with the things that offend us. Now, you may be sitting there thinking, oh, okay, I'm tracking with you. That's all good. But how do we actually live that out? What does that even look like? And I am so glad you asked, because I'm going to share it with you. James, Jesus' half-brother, sheds some light on this whole subject. And he ends up giving us 3 pieces of practical advice that we can put into practice that will help us navigate these conversations and interact with others when we experience being offended. Because here's the thing, we are all going to be offended. And so here's what James writes. Everyone should be slow to listen, quick to speak, and quick to become angry. Which actually isn't what he said. But it would go a long way in explaining the climate of the culture today, wouldn't it? Because we're all quick, slow to listen, and quick to speak, and quick to get angry and offended. What James actually writes is this, it says, everyone should be quick to listen, slow to speak, slow to become angry. Be quick to listen. Man, that sounds simple, doesn't it? Listening sounds so simple. Here's the thing, simple doesn't mean easy. I'm not sure about you, I'll just speak for myself here. I find listening hard, especially when emotions are running high. Here's why. Because I am so busy formulating my response so I can make my point heard that I don't even hear, or actually, if I'm being totally honest, don't even care what the other person is saying. They're wrong, I'm right. The sooner they get over here with me, the better things are going to be. Now, is that just me? No one else? Really? I remember someone saying to me, I was just a wee laddie. I don't know how old I was, but it was one of those earwigs. It just stuck with me, right? I just can't get it out of my brain. It might have been my mom. I don't know who it was, but they said this. Listen, God gave you 2 ears and 1 mouth, so you should listen twice as much as you speak. Fair enough, right? Good advice. But here's where my inner rebel kind of chimes in on the whole thing. It says, yeah, well, God gave me 2 hands, so I can plug my 2 ears and keep talking. I mean, we laugh, but isn't that what we tend to do? We just shut everyone else off. I mean, no offense, but that's what we do. We're slow to listen, quick to speak. Solomon, he's believed to be one of the wisest men to ever walk this planet. He wrote down these pithy little statements called Proverbs, which is probably why they're in a book called Proverbs, which is from the Old Testament. And they have all these pieces of advice that we can use to kind of navigate life. Like this one. You will say the wrong thing if you talk too much. So be sensible and watch what you say. Rather offensive. Everybody should be quick to listen and slow to speak. You know what? Jesus modeled this whole principle of being quick to listen and slow to speak so beautifully. Throw a little trivia out there for you. Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John are the biographies of Jesus, the gospel message, right? So just recounts Jesus' time in ministry when he's here on earth. Do you know how many questions he was asked in those 4 books? 183. And do you know how many he answered? 3. Jesus was slow to speak. He was interested in what was going on in people's lives. He was concerned about their worries, their fears, their doubts, their concerns. And so he listened. And then he asked questions. He was asked 183, but he asked almost double that. He asked 307. He was others focused. Jesus genuinely cared about what was important to people. He wanted to cut through the surface and get down to the heart of the matter. And so here's a quick acronym you can use as next time you're in a conversation with somebody. I learned it. It's really helped me to learn to shut up and listen. And it's this. It's WAIT. W-A-I-T. So when you're in a conversation with somebody and you hear your voice, just remember WAIT, which stands for why am I talking? Everyone should be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to become angry. And anger is a funny thing, isn't it? Now, that may sound weird because anger, isn't all that funny, but here's what I mean by that. Author and theologian, a guy named Frederick Buechner, wrote a book called Wishful Thinking, and here's what he wrote about anger. Check this out. Of the 7 deadly sins, anger is possibly the most fun. And I think he's right. It feels good to blow off some steam, right? To write a post and hit send, to write a text, to pick up the phone, to release all that pent-up aggravation, frustration, and irritation at all the idiots out there. Just kind of like Will Ferrell in that opening clip, right? Now here's a question. How effective is your anger? I mean, look what happened to Will Ferrell. He got kicked out. So how effective is your anger? Is it bringing you and those around you more joy? Is your anger enhancing your relationship? Is it making you more loving? Is it giving your children or your loved ones a life to aspire to? It's like, hey, look how angry they are. I want to be like that when I get older. Is your anger reflecting the goodness and the grace of God to others? No offense, but I think we all know the answer, don't we? It's no. Anger won't bring about any of those things, which would explain why James writes what he does next. Everyone should be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to become angry. And here's what he writes. Because human anger does not produce the righteousness that God desires. James categorizes anger. He calls it human anger, which seems to suggest there must be another kind of anger. And so I'm going to step out. We don't like to assume too much about people when they come here, where you're at in your spiritual journey. But I'm going to step out of that just for a second here, and I'm going to assume that no matter where you find yourself with God, church, Jesus, all that stuff, that you've probably heard, maybe even said this phrase, righteous anger. I became a follower of Jesus around age 12, and I remember hearing that part of being a Christian meant that you were supposed to be angry at the stuff God was angry at. And what's God angry at? Well, for the most part, sin, because it's the thing that separates us from having a relationship with him, and he wants nothing more than to have a relationship with us. And so I was taught that, as long as you're mad at that, it's okay, which made sense, but it was also confusing because I get angry at stuff that I don't think God really gets angry at. Like, I get angry when my internet is slow. Drives me nuts. I get angry when Netflix, the streaming doesn't work. I get angry. Oh, this is a big one for me. When people stop in a merge lane. Every Sunday when I leave here, I get stuck in that merge lane over by the Chevron there. I tend to get angry when I get home from the drive-thru and my fries are missing. Can you relate to that? So here's the question. What's the deal with anger then? When is anger appropriate? When is it healthy? When is it righteous? Well, for centuries, people have been trying to work through questions like that. Philosopher and theologian, for example, Thomas Aquinas, viewed anger as a natural expression of human passion, and in and of itself, didn't view it as wrong or bad. On the other hand, thinker and theologian John Cassian thought anger was something better to avoid at all costs because it has the potential to take over and blind us to our own selfishness and the harm that it causes others. The Apostle Paul, a guy we talk about a lot around here, who ended up writing almost half of what is now known as the New Testament, as he wrote these letters to different churches and first century Christians to help them kind of navigate their journey with Jesus. He wrote this. He says, "In your anger, do not sin." And we can see Aquinas and Cassian's perspective both seem to be supported in those few words. In your anger, so yes, you will get angry. It's a human emotion. Do not sin, because it has the potential to take over and blind you. So be careful. Paul goes on and he says, get rid of it. Get rid of all anger. So here's the thing. If anger is a God-given emotion, something that we all deal with and experience, at what point does it cross that line from righteous anger to human anger? Rebecca DeYoung, in her book Glittering Vices, I think gives a beautiful example of this. She put it like this. She says, when it is good, anger is a passion for justice, motivated by a love for others. Put another way, anger expressed like that is all about making a difference. But she goes on to say, and she says, the vice of anger turns a passion for justice into a passion for self-aggrandizement. I want what I want, and woe to anyone who gets in my way. Anger expressed in this way has one purpose in mind, and it's this: to promote me first agenda. It's all about making a point. You see the difference? Anger becomes a vice when it becomes about self-justification, looking out for self no matter the cost and no matter the collateral damage. But anger expressed in a positive way, or anger when it is good, when it is righteous, has justice as its object and love at its root. At their most fundamental level, both love and justice are focused on the good of others. Anger is destructive, it's negative, at best useless, at worst corrosive, when it isn't framed in love. Love is patient. Love is kind. It does not envy. It does not boast. It is not proud. It does not dishonor others. It is not self-seeking. It is not easily angered. It keeps no record of wrongs. You know, when we look at Jesus, we see a God who forgives you. A God who is patient with you. A God who is kind towards you. A God who doesn't resent you or seek to tear you down. We see a God who isn't angry. And we see God who isn't keeping a record of wrongs. And so I want to leave us all with a question. What would happen if the next time you were offended by someone or something, and you feel that offensiveness turning into anger, and it's starting to well up, and your fingers are hovering above the keyboard or above your phone, what if instead of succumbing to that temptation to just let her rip, which, and no offense, but we only do to make us feel better, what if instead you took a deep breath and grounded yourself in the fact that you are loved and accepted by Jesus, and chose instead to be unoffendable. And instead of making a point, you made a difference by looking for an opportunity to unleash God's extravagant love because you were loved. And so that's the challenge this week. And I don't think we're going to have a shortage of opportunities to put this into practice. So let's go be salt, let's go be light, and be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to become angry. We're going to be talking about this more next week. I invite you to pray with me. God, there is no question that we're in a culture that's so sensitive right now. And it's not about making people right or people wrong, but that's what's happening. We're just fracturing. It's us versus them. Them being those that don't agree with us or see things our way or agree with us. When we just get such a great example from you where we should just seek to understand where that person is coming from. And if we come to a place of disagreement, that's okay. It's tough because we all want to be heard. And if we're really honest, we all want to be right. Just help us to be less offended, to be unoffendable, and rather be salt and light and influence our sphere of influence in a positive, enlightening way. Thank you for helping us do that. And we pray all of this in your powerful name. Amen.